I'm trying to get to it right now. I'm recording the audio down there in the microphone.
Okay.
I will log into YouTube.
Right.
Hopefully all the batteries are charged enough.
Is that the nearest outlet over there?
Yeah, I'll get an extension cord.
Oh, there's one on your stool. Yeah.
Mobile Manas are down in Baja. Hello, guys.
Oh yeah, they went to
Touch
Tacos El Muelle.
Oh, we haven't been there. We didn't stop in Muley here.
Negro, taco stand. It's so good. Where do you see my?
In front of the casita.
Oh, that's good. Right. Nice. You got. Is that like a soft LED panel?
Mm-hmm.
That's killer.
Yeah, man.
You know about pro gear?
This is my first rodeo.
Well, it's because you're from Wyoming, right?
That's right.
You guys do a lot of rodeos there.
And I'm in Cape Creek now.
Right. Oh yeah.
He rode his first cow when he was 2.
And then he ate it moments after.
My bare hands.
All right. So, you guys in the live stream, hang in there for a second. We'll get right into it as soon as we're all set up here. We are running behind as usual, but at least we're streaming, right? So this counts as part of our live stream. Except for the people that are watching like way later. They're gonna be like, why is this still going on? When is this over?
Get ready for the production value to shoot through the roof.
Oh man.
Wait for it.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's awesome. I don't need
We
to
need
wear my
sunglasses.
sunglasses anymore.
No,
Oh,
you need to wear them now.
How's that looking in the internet land?
Maybe the sunglasses will come back on.
I don't really see a difference. You guys see
Why
a
it
difference?
looks better on that phone down there than that one up there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Alright.
Well, that's bored.
We're good.
We're still setting up. Sorry about that. How does one sit in a seat like this?
How did I get into my live?
Hey guys. I think we could probably get close. You guys could get closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, we look amazing down here.
Our skin tone looks vibrant.
Okay. Okay, so today we're talking about driving your RV or taking your RV to Eastern Canada, which we were going to just talk about Newfoundland Labrador, which we were both there, when was that, 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're going to not limit it to just Newfoundland Labrador. We're going to talk about the Maritimes, and we're going to just talk about kind of the eastern part altogether. So we may include part of Ontario, part of Quebec, maybe
We should definitely
like
get
Maine,
Quebec
you know,
in there.
like you can tell us what your experience is going across Maine and then crossing the border there and stuff. Because we crossed from the western side.
Yeah.
So let me make sure. Can you guys hear us good on the YouTube side? Because I noticed that I didn't test the audio when I plugged the microphone in. We got a thumbs up, so that's good. And I think they can hear us pretty good on. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can sort of format this live stream with sort of like, you know, the step-by-step process if we want to, or we can take questions, or maybe we should take like a hybrid approach where we do both. What do you guys think? I know that we have questions that people have asked already, but I think some of those, if they were organized better, we'll get to them during the entire live stream.
I think we should just start seeing if you guys have questions.
Okay, we can start with the questions.
Yeah.
Cool.
Is anybody out there planning, or do they have a desire to check out the North Atlantic and the Maritime region at all? That would be good to know. And then if you do, what are your biggest questions? I'm just going to start by saying that I think Newfoundland, well, actually, I've been corrected by a lot of locals on my YouTube channel. Newfoundland.
No, Newfoundland.
No,
Newfoundland.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
still
that
getting it
front
wrong.
A.
Newfoundland. Which is also the name of a dog. Anyway.
Well, that's where the dog is from.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always called the dog the Newfoundland.
The Newfies.
Or the Newfie. But anyway, you don't want to call people in Newfoundland Newfies. I think they take offense to that.
It's a little derogatory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's one of Canada's best kept. We loved Newfoundland. It takes a lot of driving to get there, but it is absolutely worth it. And like I said, not many people get all the way out there. In fact, we have Quebecois friends. It's in their backyard, and
Well, backyard is
right,
relatively speaking.
as far as the whole North American continent goes, it's right there in their backyard. And David and Bridget, if you're watching, why haven't you gone there yet?
Yeah. Right. And our friends Peter and Michelle, they hadn't gone until I think they finally went this last year.
Yeah.
So, and we talked to a lot of Canadians too. That it's the same. Maybe it's what a lot of Americans here think about Alaska. You know, it's part of the same country, but not a lot of people have gone. Mm-hmm. And it is a trek to get out there. I would say it's probably the most underrated place that we've ever been. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of places that are overrated, and a lot of places, most places that people say nice things about, you know, you get there and you get it. You realize why people like it. Alaska is one of those places. It's not underrated whatsoever. People love it for good reason. But not a lot of people make time to go to that part of Canada. Yeah. For a lot of reasons. You know, it's difficult, the season's short, it's a lot of driving, and when you get out to all the way to the eastern part of Newfoundland, there's like a half-hour time zone difference. So that's another thing that we found out that was really funny and tricky. Yeah.
But if you work a day job, you can like start working way before everybody and look like you're totally on top of it.
Yeah, well, for me, when I was out there, I was working at 9 to 5 on Pacific time. So I think it was like a 5.5 hour difference. So I didn't start my workday till like 1 o'clock, which was pretty great, but I worked until 9 p.m.
And the other thing is the ferry over to the Rock, as they call it, is, if you're towing an Airstream like we were, it's pretty expensive. You have to budget to get to the Rock, but once you're on it, there's a ton of free camping. So I think it's worth it. I think we all do.
Yeah. Compared to Alaska, it's not as expensive as the ferry system in Alaska.
That's true.
And then if you're coming from the States, you get the advantage of the US dollar, which also helps.
Okay, so I got the chat up here now from YouTube. Let's say hi to a few of these folks. Luis Perez from Orlando, Florida. How's it going?
Luis.
Hi, Luis.
Harambe says hello. Brad Cornelius. Brad has been a friend of ours on Instagram and Facebook for ages. And in fact, he's the one that bought my DJI Spark off of eBay.
Nice.
Congrats.
And it just, I didn't know he was bidding. I don't know if he knew right away he was bidding mine, but when it ended, he realized, hey, I just bought your Spark.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
So I don't know if it was intentional.
Better ship it.
Yeah, right. Liz Topher says hello from Toronto.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
So Liz, have you been to Newfoundland? I mean, from what we've heard, most of you guys have not. RV Life says hi. The Beach Boy says they're doing Labrador, Newfoundland from Montreal to St. John's and at the end of June with 3 kids,
Awesome.
1.5, 3, and 4.5.
Awesome.
It's kind of like our kids are a little older, but yeah, that's like our. Okay, Beach Boy wants to know, is Fogo Island worth it?
Yes.
Yes, definitely worth it.
Yes.
That's a resounding yes.
And I don't think, even if it was just mediocre, it's not hard to get to. By the time you get to Newfoundland,
Right.
it's not hard to get to Fogo
That's
Island.
true.
Dan, I'm gonna do a shameless plug, but I have a YouTube vlog all about Fogo Island. Well, I mean, you do too, but
I'll put those links down in the description once this live stream's over.
Right.
I'll
We
put
did a
Seth's
little
video
tour
there.
of the Fogo Island Inn and then the little artist retreats. There's several, 5 or 6 little hermitages that are off grid, and they were designed by this world-renowned architect from Norway or something.
Yeah, and the owner was like a tech entrepreneur who made millions in the tech world and decided to go back to her hometown on Fogo Island and build this thing, kind of invest in her community. So that was really cool.
It was such a great, quaint little island. Like,
Here we go.
Just trotting.
Yeah, did you see him? That was Woody and Bullseye. We have a lot of equestrian around here.
That was a man who was dressed as a cowboy because I think he is a cowboy, and he was trotting, you know, like sort of fast on the horse, and it's like out of a different era, but it's also out of Cave Creek. So.
Beach Boys also, you said you're going in June. That's a great idea. In fact, the sooner you can get over there into the Maritimes and Newfoundland, the better, because that increases your chances of seeing whales, but also icebergs as they're floating by down from Greenland. We saw one iceberg, but the earlier in the season you go, the more icebergs and whales you're gonna see, and that I wish that we had gone earlier for that reason, because that's really cool. You don't see icebergs really anywhere else that I can think of in North America.
Like that. Yeah, not like that.
So yeah, get up there early.
Yeah, Fogo Island is a good place to do it, and basically, when you have the island of Newfoundland, you want to go on the northeastern side, and there's a lot of little places that you can drive out to. And Fogo is one of the far ones. You take a ferry to get out there. And you can see them as far down. St. John is on the bottom right corner, but it is also on the Atlantic side. That's the farthest east you can go in North America by car.
Yeah.
I think Fogo Island, when we were there, one of the locals was telling us that they had, either that year or the year before, a polar bear was stranded on an iceberg as it drifted down from Greenland, and it landed on Fogo Island, and the polar bear got off the iceberg and went on the island. Yeah. Which is not something that they see a lot, but it does happen. It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
The other cool thing about Fogo Island and we saw it in Corner Brook too, but there's pitcher plants grow wild in the tundra, like carnivorous plants are everywhere. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, we feasted on wild blueberries too.
Oh, lots of blueberries. Yeah. That was later in the season.
Yeah, it was August.
Yeah.
I need to restart the router for this phone so I can.
Did we get frozen? No. Whoops.
It looks like we're still streaming.
I know.
We can answer some Instagram questions while Dan does that. Do you want to or wait?
Yeah.
All right, on Instagram. Hold on. Let's scroll back. How are the roads compared to U.S.? Smoother, rougher?
They're about the same. They're fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Canadians pretty much have the winter, snowy, icy road things figured out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Much better than I think the people at Alaska. I mean,
the one exception was in Labrador. There were some serious frost heaves up there, and then
yeah. Labrador is also, a lot less populated. So I can understand where, they don't quite get the same bang for the buck to spend money on the roads there. So there's still a lot of dirt roads, and in fact, we drove through Labrador, through the Trans-Labrador Highway, and a good part of that was dirt, but rumor has it that they're planning to pave that entire Trans-Labrador Highway.
It might even be already paved at this point.
It might be done.
That was 2 years ago.
Right.
These guys saw a wolf on the TLH.
Yeah, we saw one lone wolf on the Trans-Labrador Highway.
Goose Bay?
Yeah, I think we were leaving Happy Valley Goose Bay, driving towards that little company town. What is that? Churchill Falls.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's just one lone wolf. I don't know if there were others around. Sometimes there are others around. You know, they're kind of the scout. But it was really cool. Right on the side of the road, stared right at us. In fact, if you saw our Instagram posts that we put up earlier, that's the guy in the picture.
Somebody says, the McAllister tribe said that I'm from Digby, Nova Scotia, but my family lives up in Newfoundland in the northern tip.
Newfoundland.
Did I say it right?
No.
I'm rubbing off on you. The northern tip. Oh yeah, we loved that whole region up there. Another spot that I highly recommend everyone goes to is Trinity Bay.
Mm-hmm.
That was another highlight for me.
Another shameless plug of our videos from that place down there.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we camped at the lighthouse, right?
Yep. I think you guys told us about the lighthouse.
Yeah, they filmed a movie right there. In
Yeah,
that place
right.
Too.
The shipping news, right?
Yes, good memory.
There's a
good.
movie.
Kevin Spacey.
Really good memory.
A movie, The Shipping
Yeah.
News. That's
Unfortunately,
about,
it's Kevin Spacey. He's not
Oh,
not
man.
so cool anymore.
I know he's such a good actor, man.
That's
Ugh.
true.
Yeah, it's just one of those.
There are
It's
some other
unfortunate.
good actors in there too.
But yeah, The Shipping News is worth watching just to get a sort of a taste of a bit of an exaggerated taste of what the culture is about over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably one of our best boondocking spots on Newfoundland is at Trinity.
Yeah.
Yep.
Best boondocking, one of the best ever. I mean,
Yeah. Spectacular.
Yeah.
I think.
I would say.
Probably the best. Did you guys also camp right by the lighthouse too?
We didn't go all the way down the point like you did. No,
Okay, you were
but
further
We had
back.
a good. Yeah, we were pretty happy with the spot we're at.
Yeah, because right when it starts to turn, there's a road, and you told me to go up that one road to check out
Yeah.
this other spot. So
Yeah.
we did. We didn't end up going out there, but that's kind of where you guys were, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why can I get this computer?
Any other questions there?
So the polar bear things happens in St. Anthony as well.
Yeah, St. Anthony is, I think it's the town right before you get to that Viking village on the northern end. Yeah, that's probably the first place you would see iceberg float down from Greenland, because that's on the really northern part.
And speaking of that Viking village, what was it called again? The national park?
Gross Morn.
No,
It's north of Grossmore.
North of Gross
we
Morn.
didn't go there.
Oh, okay.
Lansel Meadows. Yeah.
Oh, Lonzo
Lansel
Meadows.
Meadows.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Lots of kids did a junior ranger program there, and I think that was their favorite day. They
Oh.
still
Cool.
talk about it 2 years later.
That's
Really?
great.
Oh, that's great.
A lot of times they forget a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But that place where you get to see the Viking village and try Viking clothing and actually have a campfire in the reconstructed buildings. The kids really like that.
Yeah.
So
it-
that was the settlement of the first Vikings that came over? More or
Yeah,
less?
so the story
Yeah.
there apparently is, this is all, I don't know how proven it is. They say when humans left Africa, one group of humans went east and the other went west. So the ones that went west went to Europe, and the ones that went east went to Asia. And as they started spreading across the globe, Lonzo Meadow is, they claim, where they met up again
Oh.
thousands of years later,
Yeah.
or 1,000 years later.
Yeah,
So
good
that's
thoughts.
pretty cool because Lonzo Meadows was as far as people were at the time, and it wasn't until that there was technology in building those boats that they were able to come from Europe to Iceland to Greenland, and then eventually landed on this tip where they found people like settled in this little village, and these people who had evolved over 1,000 years into Europeans, and versus these native people that had evolved over 1,000 years into whoever that tribe was. Yeah, met again for the
Yeah.
first time.
There's a lot of historical significance in that part of the world.
Okay, so the Beach Boy also wants to know about Cartwright, the detour that we took to Cartwright in Labrador. Yeah, that's quite the detour. I want to say we probably drove an extra 120 miles on dirt to get to Cartwright. The only reason why we went to Cartwright is because it was the furthest north place you can drive to in Newfoundland Labrador. It's one way in, one way out. And when we got there, it was a really, really windy day. We spent one night. It was still windy the next day. We left, and then we just drove back down the road and went back down the Trans-Labrador Highway. What's interesting is recently somebody commented on my Cartwright video. I'm going to put that link below. There's going to be like 1 million links of videos below. Said that she was from Cartwright.
Oh, cool.
And she knew the lady.
And she knew the lady. So we were talking to this lady at this one market, and then as we were leaving the market, you can hear this other lady talking to us from the other side of the vehicle, and you don't see her on camera. And she told us, "Oh, if you guys need to, cook something, come to my house. You can use, my kitchen, whatever." And this girl who commented on my video says, "I know who that lady is. I didn't have to see her face. I know who that lady is."
Wow.
So it's a really small, tight-knit community.
Yeah.
And I would say, just for the adventure of it, it's worth driving out there. And, I don't know what else there is to do. There's probably things that you can do if you get out there earlier in the season. But by the time we got there, it was wet, it was cold, it was windy. And in fact, when we left Cartwright, Labrador, it was a really windy day, and that was the only time that our friend Jason needed to use my gas from the jerry can. Because our friend who we went with drives a 72 VW bus, and it's just like a wall pushing a wall of wind with a little 40 horsepower motor. So by the time we got to Happy Valley Goose Bay, it was so windy that day that the wind had taken out the power grid in the town. Remember that? So, Coco says, Coco S. She's excited to be live with us. She's one of our biggest fans on YouTube.
Hello, Coco.
Nice seeing you, Coco.
Okay. Do we have questions on Instagram too?
Are you looking?
On the photo?
Yeah.
To get out of this part.
And also on Facebook. While we look at other photos, do you guys want to talk about your experiences crossing the border, where you crossed? And I think a lot of people who wants to go to Canada, some of them may not have ever taken their RV to Canada, so that might be a nice little tidbit to kind of include in this live stream too.
Yeah.
I mean, we've crossed multiple times from different places.
Yeah,
You
so
guys have too.
Yeah.
So how was it crossing? You guys went through Maine, which we didn't, but how was it crossing there?
Yeah.
And just generally speaking, what are the things that people should be aware of?
There are agricultural restrictions. We couldn't bring in eggs. Depending on where you're crossing, they will be picky about certain produce. So just check the Canadian border website in advance. Booze is an issue. There are limitations on booze. Guns, they're very strict about guns. No handguns. If you've got a rifle, you need to fill out a form. They only allow you to hunt, basically. It's very bureaucratized. And in terms of, they're trained to ask you certain questions, and I believe they're trained to ferret out if you just want to escape to Canada forever. So they will ask you questions about your income, employment, and there are wrong answers to that question. Don't say, "I'm unemployed." Think about what you can say. Look, a lot of us are freelancers, a lot of us work part-time, we're doing fine, stuff like that. But just think about what you can say to them that doesn't sound like you're gonna sort of disappear into the forest in Canada and never go back to the States, because that's a thing. Yeah.
The United States, at the end of the day, is we are what Mexico to the U.S. is what we are to Canada.
We're south of the border to Canada.
We're south of the border.
Yeah.
So
I would just keep it light. Just respond, we're going on a holiday. We're going to visit the Maritimes, just short, concise answers.
Yeah, don't
Right.
don't start making friends. Don't start.
It's not like a time to have small
No.
talk.
Don't
Yeah.
digress, because
right. it's serious
Yeah.
business at the border.
It is.
Yeah.
It's serious, and these border agents take their jobs very seriously. And go back to the whole like firearms thing. You can bring pump action, bolt action, and single shot rifles or shotguns. But if you say you're going to go to any other national parks at all, even with those forms, you're not going to be able to bring them in.
Oh,
So, and don't try to sneak them in. That is a bad deal.
You'll end up in jail.
so I think
But it's Canada, so it's a very nice jail.
Yeah, with hockey on TV.
I would say the Vancouver border crossing was the toughest for us when we're going to Alaska. The eastern one was smaller. You know, it seemed very, very fast and organized. That being said, you know, just don't be shady, okay?
It's
Right.
really pretty easy. There's not a lot to worry about.
Yeah.
But we crossed from Maine into New Brunswick, and it was very rural and pretty straightforward. Yeah.
We crossed from, so we've crossed into the Vancouver area probably in 3 or 4 different places. And each time it's been, you know, I wouldn't say it was difficult. We have to throw chicken away once. We had to go inside and, you know, sit and wait a bunch of time once. And I think there was only maybe 1 or 2 times where they kind of just looked at us and let us go. I would say it's not a long time to cross if you cross at, there's so many different border crossings all across. I mean, it's one of the largest borders between 2 countries in the world. So you can cross at a lot of places. I would say crossing into Canada is probably more difficult than crossing back into the U.S. And crossing back into the U.S. can have its own set of problems too. So,
Yeah.
Even for U.S. citizens.
even for U.S. citizens.
Depending on what stamps you have in your passport.
So somebody asked about Fundy National Park, the title change.
Yeah,
Did you guys go check that out?
The Bay of Fundy?
Bay of Fundy. Yeah.
We really enjoyed that. There happens to be a blog about that.
Link right there.
There was
I could even put a link somewhere.
Oh
over
yeah,
there.
up above.
There was a campsite we stayed at called 5 Islands, and it was gorgeous. And we actually dug for soft-shell clams there and got some delicious clams. And the tides are incredible. They're dramatic. They got some beautiful drone footage. The colors and the wind. It's very wild. If you're thinking about kayaking, I think there are some. It can be pretty technical because it's one of the world's biggest tides. So wouldn't recommend going out on your own. We'd recommend maybe going on a tour with somebody who knows what's up. Because I think
And
it can be
definitely
dangerous.
be aware of where the tide is.
Yeah.
Because you could be sitting in your kayak or in a boat or whatever and feel like you're not moving, but in reality you're moving 30 miles an hour, either in or out. So it's very deceiving when you're in the water because relatively speaking, between the boat and the water, it looks like you're not moving at all. But that current can go so fast,
Yeah.
it could suck you out or push you in depending on the day.
And it probably goes without saying, but bring a wind jacket, bring warm clothes, bring warm windproof clothes, bring waterproof shoes. I think beach. I grew up in San Diego. I always think it's San Diego. It's not San Diego.
In my blog, I did a time lapse of the Bay of Fundy, and for those of you who don't know, it has one of the largest tidal ranges in the world because of how the basin sits there. So when the tide goes out, it goes out about a mile from high tide out to low tide, and it's so vast. It exposes so much area of sand and beach, and that's where the clam digging happens. So it's a very dramatic tide change, and there's a time lapse that I did in that video. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
And a popular place to go out to is called Hopewell Rocks, which is right on the edge of the Bay of Fundy, on the New Brunswick side, I believe, or the Nova.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's on the New Brunswick side, And when you leave Bay of Fundy National Park, one of the campgrounds, you go east along the Bay of Fundy to go check it out. And what they're known for are these flower pot, or what do they call them?
Yeah, flower pot.
Yeah, the Hope Hill Rocks are these kind of flower pot formations that's kind of like, it's like a lollipop. It's skinny on the top and then big on the top, or skinny at the bottom, big on the top. And all of that is just from the twice a day tidal erosion that happens. Water comes in, water sucks out. Water comes in, water sucks out. Over and over and over again, where the part that's underwater gets eroded, whereas the stuff that's above water, you know, doesn't get eroded. So you end up with this amazing formations. When we were there, just over time, you know, there'll be some of these flower pot formations that can fall and, you know, at any moment, because eventually it gets too heavy on top and it will fall down. So it's amazing to go out there. You go to the edge and there are these metal stairs that go all the way down. It probably goes down like a good 40, 50 feet. It's like 4 or 5, you know, levels up from the top. And you can see when you're near the top how high the tide goes. The tide goes all the way almost to the top of those stairs. Then you go all the way down to the bottom, and it's really muddy, squishy stuff that you're stepping on. So be prepared to have to wash your feet, your legs, your clothes. Very, very muddy stuff there. But it's really amazing formations.
Yeah, and if you're interested in geology, it's there are museums, there are fossils, there are places you can collect sea glass, and there are also delicious ciders. New Brunswick, Nova Scotia had just a fantastic array of ciders, and by ciders I mean fermented ciders. So if you're interested in those, they're good.
Yeah.
Good beer too.
Okay, so let's see.
Somebody asked where our favorite place to camp on Prince Edward Island was.
We didn't make it to PEI.
No.
Okay, so Prince Edward Island, there's a national park, and Prince Edward Island is actually known for their potatoes. They are kind of Canada's Idaho, maybe?
Canada.
Can Idaho?
Good Idaho.
So when you drive across this really, really long bridge, I forget how many miles it is. It was really long, several miles. It's free one way to get out there. And once you get out to PEI, it's a really nice area. There's these huge plots of land. You okay? Be careful, Luca.
Okay, I'm gonna get up
You wanna
and
watch
help
it?
my children.
Okay. All these farms are like these storybook-looking buildings, and in fact, PEI is where the what's the book that
Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables is from PEI. So I think Anne of Green Gables is kind of like a fictitious character, but it's probably based on several. You know, I mean, this is like Canada's Lower Ingalls Wilder, right? So basically, it's this kind of like homesteading story about people living out in the country. But Prince Edward Island has a great campground. Actually, has several campgrounds, and we stayed at a campground right on the national park. We also stayed at another campground on the eastern shore of Prince Edward Island. It's near the town of, I should look it up. It's near the town of, here we go. And when you cross the bridge, you can pretty much drive all the way around Prince Edward Island. We didn't drive that much. Charlottetown, I think. Yeah, Charlottetown's actually sort of like a little bit to the east of Middle, and it's like a big bay that kind of goes inside. Charlottetown is where we went and I think had like Thai food in town, and then we stayed at a campground just north of there with Jason and Angela, and also Dave and Ann.
I wrote down Red Point.
That's what it's called, Red Point Provincial Park. Yep, that was a nice little campground. And there are two ways to get off the PEI. One way is to take that bridge back the way you came, which I believe that is when you get charged. And I think it's like a $30 toll, so it's pretty pricey. And the other way, you can actually take a ferry on the southeastern part of Prince Edward Island, and I think that'll take you to almost to Nova Scotia. So I think if you're planning to go to Nova Scotia, you can take that ferry, you can take the bridge in and the ferry out, but the ferry is still more expensive than the bridge, even though the bridge is pretty expensive for a bridge.
We picked a bridge.
We picked a bridge. We drove back on the bridge.
Yeah.
We're cheap. Somebody said, do you recommend the Cabot Trail?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's another place that you have to go if you're going to be in the Maritimes, is to go up to Cape Breton and just drive along the Cabot Trail. Cape Breton is also another national park.
Yeah. And it gets
You guys
warm
were there.
enough on that beach to go swimming. That was a
Bingo
warm
niche.
beach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You guys got the, so pro tip is wait till the campground fills up and go to overflow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The overflow parking is sweet.
It's right down on the beach. You're in a parking lot, you know, with like a few hundred of your closest friends, but that's where we wound up, and we could just walk right out the door of the beach. So that worked out all right.
Right, so we heard that and then we asked, but because there was a vacancy in the campground, they did not let us go down to overflow.
But on the Cabot Trail, we highly recommend the Cabot Trail is the highway that goes around the island, but there's a hike called the Skyline Trail that is spectacular, and I have a video there on that, and it's 2 miles out to this point, just spectacular view of the ocean up there, and it's great to go for sunset, and there's usually wildlife, you can see moose and stuff, but be careful.
Yeah, be careful of the moose.
And yeah, the Skyline Trail
Yeah.
is a must.
We went to another place that we camped at with Dave and Ann and Angela and Jason.
Meat
at
something.
Meat Cove.
Meat
Meat Cove.
Yeah.
Meat Cove.
There's no boondocking. It's a paid campground, but it's an amazing campground. You're right at this point, and it's actually quite dangerous if you have unruly kids. Our kids are okay, but you could be right at this edge, and then you can just look right down. And there's actually one little rock that kind of protrudes away from the point, and there's like a tiny little ridge that you can walk out to it. I don't think you were supposed to, but there was somebody pitching a tent out there and sleeping.
Oh, wow.
So
That seems dicey.
yeah. And the boondocking spot that we found. You drive up that dirt road. When we drive around the Cabot Trail, I think it was. It's on Compendium, and I think Brian named it after us or something. Called it like Mish Point or something like that.
Nice.
And somebody
Yeah.
said they went there. Like, oh,
Yeah,
that's
somebody
which
went
one?
there, and then they really enjoyed boondocking
I
there.
don't know if I'd take a trailer there.
No,
It was just
no.
a truck camper.
Oh, speaking of which, Michelle from Everlong Journey wants to know if they can take their Class C. I don't see any reasons why you can't take more or less any kind of RV to Maritimes and Newfoundland Labrador. It's just, yeah, some really hard to get to places. Maybe you don't want to go. Maybe you don't want to drive to Cartwright, for example. Maybe
I wouldn't drive the Trans-Labrador in a Class C.
unless it's all paved now.
Oh, unless it's all paved.
It could be all paved.
True,
now.
true.
Right. Our concern more about driving the Trans-Labrador, which still might be the case, is connectivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Was that a horse or
That
a
was a
donkey?
horse.
It's a lot of horses.
Connectivity is a bigger problem than anything else, because we didn't get any connectivity once we. I don't even know if I had connectivity after we crossed the ferry to Labrador. Oh, we did at that little tower church or whatever. Oh no, it's lighthouse.
In Labrador?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So that lighthouse we
Point
camped
of
at.
more.
Yeah, that had connectivity. I think it was from across the water though. Do you
Yeah,
think?
we did have signal there, yeah.
So once you get farther out of there, I think cell service pretty much dies out until you get to Labrador City, which is pretty much at the end of Trans-Labrador Highway.
And a note on lighthouses. If you're a fan of lighthouses, there are a lot of beautiful lighthouses to be seen in the Maritimes and Newfoundland and Labrador. Well, Labrador there's like 3, because then you're just out in the wild. But yeah. Really
Well, Liz
beautiful
Topher is very proud that we know so much about Canada.
Oh, nice.
Well, thank you. We try really hard.
We love Canada, but we don't tell that to the border patrol people, the border
No.
crossing, because then they'd be like, "Oh,
Right.
come back to our
Right,
room."
you
and
have to leave. You can't stay
tell us more
forever.
about that.
Right. Yeah, one of the questions they asked me was, they told me, well, you know you can't work while you're there, or you can't work for any companies in Canada while you're here. And I said, oh yeah, of course, because I work for a company in the U.S. and they wouldn't allow that. And then he said, no, the Canadian government wouldn't allow it. So, touche.
Touche. Question?
So one trick, pro tip for Newfoundland is they call boondocking gravel pit parking, because you'll see when you're driving the highways, there will be just pull-offs that have gravel on them, and I think it's just sort of a euphemism for boondocking. But there's a lot of boondocking in Newfoundland. You could probably camp for free the whole time if you wanted to.
Crown lands, that's like our
That's the BLM equivalent.
BLM, yeah.
This production value is a lot better. Look at the fading light behind us. Look
I
how
will
good
say
this looks.
the roads, the
I think we need to buy a little LED panel. Oh, sorry.
The Crown Lands roads, if you're worried about road quality, the roads going into the Crown Lands in Newfoundland were not that great.
No, we yes, actually, yeah. We had a probably the worst washboardy road I've ever encountered was on Crown Lands in
Yeah.
Newfoundland.
We had one, we drove onto some crown land in BC. With the Airstream? No, without the Airstream. It was pretty rough, and the mosquitoes were ridiculously bad. We didn't have a bad year either in Newfoundland with mosquitoes,
No,
but I
it wasn't
imagine
bad.
that it can be bad, just like it can be bad in Alaska and places where it's very woody.
Yeah.
Yeah, tundra.
Yep. Once you get out to Newfoundland, I mean, I had this vision in my head of it just being like a complete like wilderness experience, but it's actually quite developed. Corner Brook is a cool town, and then when you get to St. John's, it's like a full-on city. I mean, a small city, but there's a lot of culture there. Really cool downtown with the Jelly Bean Row. There's lots of colorful buildings where the city ordinance requires them to paint each building a different color. And
So
then,
you can't be the same color as your neighbor, for example.
yeah, and it's very, very picturesque. There's a Signal Hill there in St. John's, which was the site of the first radio transmission over from Europe. But the views are spectacular. The cliffs, the rock outcroppings. There's this hike. The West Coast Trail? I mean,
East Coast
Trail.
Trail.
So the West Coast Trail is obviously over in British Columbia, and then the East Coast Trail goes right through St. John's and through the Narrows, which is where the shipping lane and all the maritime activity happens, into the city of St. John's. It's all just very stunning. Great place to hike around. And so St. John's is awesome. There's a Costco there, which was a bonus.
You gotta find Costco everywhere.
So it's pretty well developed. It's not, as like wild and remote, as I thought it would be.
But it's still pretty pristine.
I think part of why St. John's is that developed is because they can have big ships bring stuff there.
Yeah, there's good trade with England. And
Yeah.
UK.
Right.
So St. John is a great place. In Corner Brook, like you said, I think that's the first big town you get to when you get off the ferry. And speaking of the ferry, there's 2 ferries to and from Newfoundland. One is the short one and one is the long one. The short one is like a good 7-8 hours, right? You can do it overnight, but usually the overnight ferries are all booked.
Well, you can,
especially if you want a cabin to sleep in.
Exactly. Yeah, the cabins book out very well in
Really
advance,
fast.
and we found that out the hard way both times. You can. We brought thermarests and just sort of slept under the seats.
Yeah.
Like sort of redneck Riviera style.
So what we found out too is that it's risky to not book a cabin if you're going to do an overnight, because you may be sleeping very uncomfortably if it's crowded. But maybe it's the time of the season that we went. We found out that the cabins were booked, but the seating area was more or less
fine.
open.
Yeah, it was open.
And the seats are nice.
The seats are nice.
We wanted to have a cabin, even though we didn't do an overnight trip. We did an afternoon trip, I think. We got there just before it got dark, and we reserved the cabin anyways because they had showers in them. And we were in our 4-wheel camper that doesn't have a shower. So that was our opportunity to take a shower while we're on the boat. When you take the short ferry, because the long ferry would take you almost straight to St. John's, like I think a town south of it, whereas the short ferry takes you from North Sydney in Nova Scotia to the closest point in Newfoundland, which is about 7 or 8 hours, I think. I have a video of it right there. Right there.
So
I'm not going to remember to put any of this stuff in the descriptions.
You got some work to do.
Mark said that we should be in their NL commercials.
No, I want to be in the Regina commercial.
That's
that
not the
Alberta?
Maritimes.
Okay.
So
That's not the Maritimes.
a little note about the ferry, because it's interesting. It's a nice ferry. When we got there from, well, both directions, there was a line. They will measure your car with I wouldn't call it a yardstick, a meter stick.
Well,
It's one of those wheels that they.
Yeah.
Some of the older folks are still on the imperial system because they switched recently,
Oh.
like in the 80s or 90s, I think.
Oh, okay.
So they still go by inches and feet and stuff
Oh,
like
what a
that.
trip.
Yeah.
And then they put you in special lanes, and then you park your rig, and we brought our dog. We just left her in the rig. That's perfectly fine. And then you get to a seating area. If you're in the seating area, definitely bring things to make yourself comfortable. It's not exactly warm. Also, if you tend to get seasick, wear seat bands. That crossing can be smooth, but on the way back, when we were laying down, I definitely got air a couple times because it was like,
really?
yeah.
Wow.
And a man, like at least 3 men were like, and it was like a very
Yeah.
loud, sort of bumpy experience.
Yeah, we didn't take that ferry.
It wasn't a
We
That
didn't
was
take that
snoring,
ferry
by the
back.
way.
Sleep apnea.
Yeah. It's like,
She said snoring, not sorry, which is how Canadians say sorry. We didn't take that ferry back because we drove around Trans-Labrador Highway to get back. But I can imagine because you guys were there pretty long. And you guys were getting there towards probably right at the end of the season when you shouldn't even be there anymore, close to it. And then you guys ended up staying like the winter in Quebec.
yeah, so
Not in the Airstream, but.
No, what happened was we, on the way back, we just kind of, I think we came back in September, no, even October. I mean, we really pushed it. And we were driving to, was it Quebec City? Yeah, through New Brunswick, and this deer was in a center divider. We couldn't even see the animal, and it jumped out at, just when deer like to jump out, which is just when you'll hit them. So it actually destroyed the side of our car, and we got that repaired, and we had a friend who had an open space in Montreal, so we stayed there for a while. But well, yeah, watch for deer. And moose.
We haven't really talked about Grossmoor National Park. That is up in Newfoundland. It's also a must to go check that out. There's you can do a little boat tour on Western Brook Pond and they call it a pond, but it's like a large lake. And the lake has been glacially carved through this granite canyon. The views are spectacular, so do not miss Grossmore National Park. We did a backpacking trip of like 25 miles from start to finish through there. There's a vlog down below.
You're gonna have me add these links in. You know that, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
It's getting dark,
Yeah.
and it just my body is telling me I need to hold something in my hand.
Just circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So culturally, Newfoundland is just fascinating. A lot of the original accents of the various people who immigrated from from England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales remain intact. So one part of the island, one town, people may have immigrated from a certain part of Scotland. Another town, they may have immigrated from somewhere in England, and over the generations, those accents are still alive. So there are many.
Because they're so isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are many
They didn't get a
accents
lot of
there
influences.
that are just really fun to listen to. And the little colorful fishing houses and this sort of windswept tundra in some areas are more reminiscent of Scandinavia than than
Yeah.
anywhere
Yeah.
else I've seen in North America.
That's also of the
Neat.
Viking influence as well.
Yeah.
So there's Viking influence. The Scottish influence is clear in Cape Breton because it's called the national park. It's called Cape Breton Highlands National Park, and in parts of it you can imagine yourself in Scotland with these cliffs that run up from the water.
Right.
I'd imagine immigrants from Scotland came to Cape Breton and probably felt like home.
Yeah, they're like, right on. Yeah.
It's like Pangea. It just seems like the island broke off from Europe and just drifted over to North America. That's literally what it feels like. Yeah.
Pat Lucas says hello from Reno. Hey Pat, that was from a little while ago. Sorry we didn't get to you until right now.
We have a hello from Ventura, our old hometown.
Oh, no way.
Hello.
Who is it? Man Pochon?
That's why maybe you say it. That's all my questions
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
on Instagram.
One thing I would want to add too, just a note, if you like to be outdoors, we're always mountain biking and kayaking and trying to be outdoors as much as we can. The kayaking there, you make sure you got some skills. I would say by and large, if you're doing ocean kayaking, this is a strong northern Atlantic
And cold.
situation with currents, cross currents, waves.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're strong. You know what you're doing. I wouldn't mess with it. And then the hiking the long range traverse trail, which we backpacked
Grossmore National Park.
in Grossmore National Park. If you're into backpacking, it was
Drea,
one of
can
the
you give us that thumbnail image of you? This is what I have in
the
my
most
mind.
brutal backpacking trips we've ever done. And we come to find out later that it's almost it's got a reputation. It's like there was a guy in a bike shop in Corner Brook who was like, oh yeah, I backpack it every year. It's almost like a sort of suffer fest that just makes you feel good afterwards. So it's got a reputation. We didn't know that. But yeah, be tough, man. Be tough.
Yeah.
And you gotta find all things moose there, and elk. If you're not a vegetarian, go find yourself some game meat burgers. Was it?
Reindeer sausage.
Reindeer sausage. Yeah. There was a store, a little market, actually a decent sized market, just outside of St. John's, that had the craziest wild game meat inventory I've ever seen.
Cool.
Do you remember that place?
Yeah.
What was that? What's the name of that place? I forgot who told us about it.
Birthday?
Yeah, so our
It was St.
middle kid,
John's.
it was St. John's, but I
Yeah.
forget the name of the place though. But you gotta explore St. John's. Like St. John's alone, you can probably spend a good 2 weeks to a month just
Yeah.
hanging out.
Kitty Vitty Brewery is there for
Yeah.
beer
Good
lovers.
beer.
Great beer.
Yeah, iceberg beer. Did you guys try the iceberg beer?
Indeed.
The
So what's
iceberg
that?
beer.
It's in a
Iceberg.
blue bottle.
Yep. It's made from melted iceberg, so it could have like dinosaur microbes in it, for all we know.
We spent probably close to 2 or 3 months there.
Newfoundland?
Yeah, and what we noticed was the island has like, you can we ended up wanting to explore every corner because there's such a variety of cultures and variety of just
and there are a lot of roads to drive.
spots.
Yeah, you can go to France in Newfoundland.
Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, like you can take a ferry. There are these tiny little islands that are just archaically French colonies, but something tells me they're always going to be French colonies. It used to be a way to get wine during the Prohibition era, but I'm pretty sure it was a colony before that.
Yeah, so what I heard about that little island too, when you go there, you literally have to show your passport. You're physically entering France, and it's all French speaking there with, boulangerie selling baguettes and all that. The reason why I was there, from what I understand, is for fishing rights. I think, so I think that's why they still kept it, even though they don't really get anything else out of it.
That's the other thing. There is still a cod fishery, and those fish are good. They're very, very good.
Absolutely, and we've been talking almost an hour, and we've not gotten around to talking about their lobster. Right, so this is mostly like, I don't know how much of it is in Newfoundland, Labrador, but definitely Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, that whole area. Like you can have days and days of online battles talking about the types of lobster roll and who has the best and what style you want. You want the Halifax, Nova Scotia style, or do you want the Maine, the New England lobster and whatever different types of
Costco was
lobster,
supposed to have lobster
Connecticut
roll.
lobster.
We never found the lobster roll at Costco.
Yeah, we
myth.
heard that. We heard that some Costco had cheap lobster rolls, but we never found it. So if any of you guys are from Nova Scotia, you know which Costco we need to go to, that'll be a reason for us to go back there.
And then on the topic of Eastern Canada, Quebec is Eastern Canada as the crow flies. Quebec City is like an old European city. It's absolutely gorgeous. We love Quebec. Maybe our favorite province? I don't know. But Montreal is fun, good food, good laughs.
Montreal is like New York City.
Yeah.
In Canada.
Yeah.
It's probably the closest thing they have to New York City there. They have the Montreal meat sandwich. What do they call it? The roast meat. Montreal smoked meat sandwich.
Smoked meat.
So good. It's like going to Cat's Deli in New York City, right? You go find like their traditional Montreal smoked meat sandwiches.
Man, yeah, makes me want to go back.
I
would go back in a heartbeat, and there's so many places that we missed.
We missed so many places.
Yeah.
And reality is, there's the season is so short, just like Alaska, and you can't hit everything in the time that you have out there. It could probably be a place that you go visit like 3 winters and hope to see most things. Not winters, 3 summers, 3 seasons over 3 years. I would spend probably a whole season in Newfoundland. I would spend a whole season in kind of lower Maritimes, meaning mostly like Nova Scotia, maybe parts of New Brunswick, and maybe some PEI. And then we didn't really, when we got to New Brunswick, we wanted to get down to Nova Scotia and Fundy National Park so quickly that we skipped a lot of New Brunswick. So that really, we couldn't really speak a lot on. There's so much that you can do.
Quebec is big, and there's even, if you're motivated, there's a ferry that runs from Quebec and sort of dots its way along the coast and ends up in Labrador, and that is supposed to be stunningly gorgeous.
Yeah, there's when you drive down the Trans-Labrador Highway, so we drove, live video paused? Okay. Instagram is reconnecting. When you,
Thanks for watching.
oh, is it over?
I think that's an hour.
Oh.
Do we need it?
We just keep talking.
Yeah. See ya. Okay. Instagram is over, but we'll finish up on YouTube here. When we drove down the Trans-Labrador Highway, when you get to Labrador City, you're kind of home free. But from there, the drive through Labrador, from Labrador City to Quebec City, is almost as amazing as the other parts of as most of the Trans-Labrador Highway.
Huh.
You drive through a lot of dirt roads still. You drive by this massive meteor crater, and it's massive. Like, I tried to fly the drone up to see if I can get a look from above. I flew as high as I could, and it still didn't look like a crater.
Wow.
So it's absolutely massive, and I don't know if it's the one that killed the dinosaurs, but it's gotta have killed a lot of creatures when it first happened. But you can see it when you go on Google Maps. You look down, it's clearly a massive crater. So this is just a corner of it that we drove, past the edge of. So I think that's a pretty good hour-long discussion about Eastern Canada. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't touch on, like driving through Ontario, driving by the Great Lakes, Eastern Canada, when we drove through there. It's a really long drive, but maybe we'll save that for a different day.
Yeah.
If in doubt about going all the way up to Newfoundland, just say yes. Just do it. It's a very, very special slice of North America.
Once you get up there, you'll wish you had more time, so go as soon as possible. As early in the season as possible, yeah.
How do you rank that? Like, if you had the choice between Alaska and Eastern Canada, I mean, you have to go to both eventually.
I would just rank it depending on whichever coast you find yourself on.
Right,
Yeah.
right. If you're from the East Coast and you haven't been,
Yeah,
it's easier for you to go there.
yeah.
If you're on the West Coast, maybe easier for you to go to Alaska. So, well, great. Thank you guys for joining us on this live stream.
Thanks, everybody.
And if you guys enjoy this live stream, give us a like below. If you're not subscribing, subscribe to my channel and also Seth's channel. And Marlene also has a channel. She just puts up our Instagram stories on there from the day. Drea, are you promoting anything?
Nope.
She's all valued.
Yeah.
I'll give, no take.
Yeah. If you guys enjoy these types of live streams where we talk about places we've been, I think we're gonna do one more, if time permits, about Baja in the next live stream. We'll see when we can get around to that. But I think there's a lot of information that you can get online. But I think, both of us have been there recently. We've been there the last couple of years. You guys went the year before that. So we can give you guys a lot of tips about that. So if you're interested in hearing about Baja, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Thanks
for
watching.
watching.
Everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.